Has there always been an ozone layer?
No. Before plants evolved on the planet, there was no ozone layer. Because plants are responsible for converting carbon dioxide in the atmosphere into oxygen molecules. So, life on Earth actually began to evolve before there was an ozone layer.
What is a state climatologist?
A state climatologist is a professional in the field who has been designated by a state government or agency of the state as the state's official climatologist. They must also be recognized by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and by the Director of the National Climatic Data Center. Currently, 48 states have a state climatologist, the exceptions being Tennessee, Rhode Island, as well as Washington, D.C. Also climatologists have been designated for Puerto Rico, Guam, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. State climatologists are supported by the American Association of State Climatologists, which was founded in 1976. State climatologists receive their salaries either from the state or from a university. And they also work closely with the National Weather Service.
Are wind farms a good way to solve the energy crisis and global warming?
Power from wind farms seems like it would be a very good solution to at least some of our energy needs. Wind, though unreliably fickle, is free, does not require mining, and is clean. Also, windmills and generators have been improving to make this technology more economical. Currently, wind power supplies about 0.1% of the world's electricity. But that is growing at a rate of about 30% a year. There are problems with wind farms, however. For one thing, the giant windmills you find in places like Southern California kill birds and other animals. Any hapless bird who flies near one is apt to be chopped into bits. Some conservationists are worried this could actually kill some birds on the endangered species list. A 2002 study conducted in Spain of its wind farms noted that 350,000 bats, 3 million small birds, and 11,200 birds of prey were killed by windmills and associated power lines in just 1 year. The Altamont Pass Wind Resource Area near Palm Springs, California, which consists of 4,900 windmills, is responsible for the deaths of 4,700 birds annually, about one per windmill, including 1,300 raptors, birds of prey, such as burrowing owls and golden eagles. Because of increasingly limited land space, some countries are building wind farms offshore. For example, England is constructing a new wind farm that will cover 145 square miles. 375 square kilometers, off the Kent, Essex, Clacton, and Margate coastlines. Such offshore farms, of course, now pose a threat to seabirds. Another fact is that wind farms take up a lot of space. Situated on hillsides and open plains, they effectively destroy what could be wildlife habitat. Each windmill takes up about 1,600 square feet, 144 square meters, of space. Furthermore, building the vast wind farms needed to power cities takes a lot of resources, including the steel, concrete, and other materials needed to build and maintain windmills and the oil and gasoline that is burned during construction.
Is there a sunspot cycle?
Yes. Sunspot activity goes through a two-cycle pattern of high and low activity. One that lasts about 11 years, more accurately, about 10 years, 6 months, and also an 88-year cycle of highs and lows. And astronomers speculate an even longer pattern might be possible. The first person to observe sunspot cycles was German astronomer Heinrich Samuel Schwab, 1789 to 1875. Originally a pharmacist, Schwab became an amateur and then professional astronomer. Wondering whether there was another planet besides Mercury and Venus close to the Sun, he accidentally discovered sunspots and became completely fascinated by them. From 1825 until near the end of his life, he observed the Sun daily, recording the number of sunspots he observed. From these observations, he noticed that there were periods of greater and lesser activity, which he thought came in cycles of about 10 years. A fairly close approximation, given the quality of telescopes at the time.
What are spiral bands?
The clouds arranged in curving bands that form the outside of a hurricane, rather like those in a spiral galaxy, are called spiral bands. They can extend for several hundred miles beyond the eye of the hurricane.
How many people will find themselves in flooded coastal regions should global warming melt the ice caps?
Worldwide, over 150 million people would find themselves underwater by the year 2070 should scenarios about global warming play out. This includes 130 important port cities, such as New York City, Tokyo, Hong Kong, Mumbai, and Bangkok. A 2007 estimate said that this would have an economic impact of $35 trillion, an amount no nation is currently equipped to surmount. Not only would such a flood destroy coastal cities, but mass migrations would occur, causing political and social unrest that many believe would inevitably lead to military conflicts, famines, and disease.
What is wind shear?
Wind shear refers to rapid changes in wind speed and slash or direction over short distances and is usually associated with thunderstorms. Sometimes, though, wind shears can also occur as a result of a strong front moving through a region, or from abrupt changes in air mass near mountains. Wind shear is especially dangerous to aircraft, and Doppler radars at airports help to warn pilots of this threat.
What is a blue sun?
An even rarer event than a blue moon is a blue sun. As with a real blue moon, the sun can appear bluish as a result of fires. Volcanic eruptions, or sandstorms coating the air in dust, ash, or sand.
How is a corona different from a halo?
As with a corona or anti-corona, halos are created by light passing through clouds of ice crystals. Coronas, when they have some color to them, are reddish on the outside of the ring and bluish on the inside. While halos are red on the inside and blue on the outside. Coronas tend to be formed when altostratus clouds are present, while halos occur with cirrostratus clouds in the air. A halo's radius extends at a 22-degree angle from the moon or sun, but on rare occasions subtends at 46 degrees. Coronas have smaller angular diameters than halos. Because the cirrostratus clouds causing halos contain icy crystals that could lead to rain. Folklore about the sighting of halos correctly concluded that halos may predict oncoming rain.
What major gases do volcanoes emit?
Volcanic gases contained within the magma, molten rock, are released as they reach the Earth's surface, escaping at the major volcanic opening or from fissures and vents along the side of the volcano. The most prevalent gases are carbon dioxide, CO2, and hydrogen sulfide, H2S. Carbon dioxide is a dangerous gas. It is invisible and odorless, and can kill within minutes. One example in which volcanic gases proved dangerous involved the Dieng volcano complex, or Dieng Plateau, in Java, Indonesia. It consists of 2 volcanoes and over 20 craters and cones, and is noted for its poisonous gas emissions at some craters. In 1979, at least 149 people were killed by poisonous gases as they fled eruptions at 2 of the craters, the Sinala and Sigludung.
What is the purpose of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA?
NOAA is an agency within the U.S. Department of Commerce that is responsible for monitoring conditions on land, and in the seas that have an effect on our weather, climate, and environment. NOAA is, of course, heavily involved in atmospheric research and weather forecasting. But the agency also supports the responsible management of fisheries, is concerned with marine commerce, and is involved in studies to prevent coastal erosion, among many other projects. In essence, NOAA is interested in fostering the economic and environmental health of the country, as well as the safety of its citizens, through scientific management of oceanic, coastal, and mainland resources.
What is a rope tornado?
A rope tornado is simply a descriptive phrase referring to a tornado that has a thin, bending, rope-like appearance. Some people make the bad mistake of thinking that rope tornadoes are regular tornadoes that are beginning to dissipate. Dissipating tornadoes are described as roping out. Actually, they can be just as intense as tornadoes with much wider funnels.
Are some people allergic to the sun?
There are two rather odd reactions some people have to the sun. 1. Allergic conjunctivitis is relatively harmless. This is when sudden exposure to the sun, such as when leaving a darkened building, causes a sneezing reaction inspired by the sun's ultraviolet radiation. It can also cause redness and itchiness in the eyes, which is easily remedied with sunglasses and antihistamines. More serious is something called sun poisoning, which causes a rash known as polymorphous light eruption. PLE, with itchy bumps and swelling of the skin. Even suntan lotion does not prevent this reaction for people who are ultra-sensitive to the sun's rays. Topical corticosteroids are typically prescribed by doctors to treat the rash.
Do loud noises trigger avalanches?
The notion that making loud noises, such as shouting or clapping one's hands, near dangerous snow conditions will trigger an avalanche is an old myth. Actually, it would take a tremendous sound, such as a nearby sonic boom where an avalanche is about to occur anyway, for noise to make a difference. In 90% of cases, avalanches are precipitated by a person's or persons' weight, or the weight of a snowmobile or other machine, on top of unstable snow.
What is a wall cloud?
Wall clouds can be warnings that a tornado is about to form in a bank of cumulonimbus clouds. As a mesocyclone expands and gains strength below the cumulonimbus clouds, it begins rotating as warm, humid air moves upward and condenses. Convergence causes the gathering wall cloud to rotate cyclonically. though slowly compared to the tornadoes it could form. Storm chasers who observe such wall clouds know that they can form full-fledged tornadoes within an hour's time.
What is the Fata Morgana?
This fantastical mirage gets its name from Italy, where this particular type of superior mirage is frequently seen in the Strait of Messina between Sicily and the Italian mainland. Named after the Arthurian legend of Morgan le Fay, who tales tell had a palace beneath the sea. This optical illusion occurs when light diffraction causes distant buildings to appear vertically stretched and, thus, more like castles.
Can the ozone hole be healed?
Yes. While the latest figures represent an increase in the ozone hole size over previous years, there is some good news. Compared to the 1980s, the hole is expanding more slowly. If we continue to reduce pollutants, the expansion may eventually stop and be reversed. Scientists believe that, if this happens, it will take about 50 years for ozone levels to return to natural levels.
What is an acoustic shadow?
An acoustic shadow is kind of like a mirage, only involving sound instead of light. Differences in temperatures at varying atmospheric layers causes sound waves to refract or bend. Also, wind shears and the absorption of sound on soft surfaces can contribute to the effect. The result can be that sounds coming from a particular source might not be heard by someone standing fairly close by, while other people located farther away, but in a direction where sounds are being refracted, can hear the sound. A famous example, the consequences of acoustic shadow, is often cited from the U.S. Civil War. During the 1862 Battle of Seven Pines in Richmond, Virginia, Confederate General Joseph Johnston told his commanders that, upon hearing gunfire from soldiers being led under Major General D.H. Hill, he would order Brigadier General W.H.C. Whiting to send in an attack on the Union's flank. However, because of acoustic shadow, Johnston was unable to hear the battle noise and the flank attack was not sent in when it was needed. The Confederates subsequently lost the battle.
What is an ice age?
Geologists define an ice age as a period when more of the Earth's surface was covered by larger ice sheets than in modern times, or when cool temperatures endured for extended periods of time, allowing the polar ice to advance into lower, more temperate latitudes. The last ice age event, which ended about 12,000 years ago, is referred to as the Ice Age or the Great Ice Age, both usually capitalized A time. When ice covered nearly 32% of the land and 30% of the oceans.
What is the Kelvin temperature scale?
The Kelvin scale is typically used in laboratories dealing with extremely cold temperatures. 0 degrees Kelvin indicates absolute zero, which is the point at which molecular motion stops. The scale is named after the first Baron Kelvin, William Thomson, 1824 to 1907, who was a British engineer and physicist. Thomson developed the absolute thermometric scale, which used degrees Celsius as its increments and had absolute zero being -273 degrees Celsius. The actual figure has now been determined at -273.15 degrees Celsius. Such extremes are rarely needed in meteorological studies, however.
What is a Hooke echo?
A Hooke echo, also called a Hooke pattern, is a warning sign that a tornado has possibly formed. On radar, the echo looks kind of like the number 6 and is associated with a mesocyclone within a storm. So it is called a tornadic mesocyclone. The distinctive Hooke shape was first seen on April 9, 1953, by electrical engineer Donald Staggs, who was monitoring the radar system at the Illinois State Water Survey in Champaign. A Hooke echo does not necessarily indicate a tornado has definitely formed, but it is a strong indication that it has. On the other hand, tornadoes can and do form without the telltale Hooke echo ever being seen.
What is an Alberta clipper?
An Alberta clipper is a storm that develops on the Pacific front, usually over the Rocky Mountains of Alberta, Canada. This quick-moving storm moves southeast into the Great Plains, leaving a trail of cold air and snow.
What is permafrost?
Permafrost refers to soil that is frozen all year long, even during the summer, for 2 consecutive years or more. Such conditions occur in areas where the mean annual temperature is 23 degrees Fahrenheit -5 degrees Celsius or less. Construction in polar regions where permafrost is found can be problematic, because sometimes the ground can thaw beneath a building that was constructed over frozen ground. When this happens, building foundations are easily compromised.
Does air pressure change as elevation rises above sea level?
Yes, it does. The higher you go, the less air, or atmospheric, pressure there is. Air pressure is also involved in weather systems. Closer to the ground, air pressure decreases at a rate of about 0.01 inches of mercury for every 10 feet, 3 meters. By the time you are at an elevation of 18,000 feet, 5,500 meters, air pressure is about half what it is at sea level. A low-pressure system is more likely to bring rain and bad weather versus a high-pressure system, which is usually drier.
What is a steam devil?
In the Arctic, and, less often, Antarctic, or any other place where conditions are right, cold air passing over warm areas of water can cause steam to rise. And when a whirlwind sweeps in at the same time, this steam or fog forms small steam devils.
How was the ozone hole discovered?
The famous meteorologist Gordon Miller, born Dobson, 1889 to 1976, was the first to make accurate measurements of the ozone in the 1920s. But it wasn't until 1979 that the depletion of the ozone was observed at the South Pole by the Nimbus 7 satellite. Today, a network of Dobson spectrophotometers have been set up around the world to monitor changes in the ozone.
What do some people fear will occur in December 2012?
There is currently a growing number of doomsday believers who believe the world will end in December 2012. They explain that prophecies stemming from sources as diverse as the Mayan calendar and Nostradamus predict that human civilization will either be destroyed or dramatically changed at that time because a comet will strike the planet. Biblical numerologist Harold Camping has made a similar prediction, except that he places the date at October 21, 2011. Astronomers tracking comets, however, have found no evidence that any of the comets in our solar system are heading our way anytime soon.
What are the hail belts?
Hail belts are regions that are ideal for hailstorm formation. They can be found downwind of mountain ranges, usually in mid-latitude areas.
What are near-Earth objects and are they dangerous?
There are hundreds, if not thousands, of NEOS near-Earth objects, which are asteroids with orbits that cross Earth's orbit. And NEO could indeed strike our planet, possibly unleashing cosmic destruction. As of early 2009, astronomers have tracked nearly 6,000 near-Earth objects. Of these, 765 have diameters of more than a mile across, and over 1,000 are considered potentially hazardous asteroids. FOS, meaning that their orbits take them uncomfortably close to Earth.
What is a barograph?
Resembling a seismograph, a barograph records changes in air pressure over time. A recording arm with a pen on one end moves side to side. Drawing a line over a paper or foil chart that moves over a rotating barrel.
Is air really thin?
Like anything else, thin is a relative term. Compared to the vacuum of space, air is very dense. But compared to a chunk of marble, or even a bottle of water, it is very thin indeed. For something in a gaseous state, air is actually quite thick. At sea level, molecules in the air are spaced only about 1/millionth of an inch apart.
What are some of the lowest temperatures ever recorded?
The table below lists some of the most chilling temperatures by region that have been recorded by meteorologists.
How loud is thunder?
A clap of thunder can be as loud as 120 decibels, abbreviated dBA, which is as loud as the noise at a rock concert, a chainsaw, or a pneumatic drill.
What is the speed of sound?
The speed of sound can vary, depending on air pressure and, more importantly, temperature. The conventionally accepted speed, which is useful for estimating the distance to a lightning stroke, is about 1 mile for every 5 seconds. More precisely, sound travels at 740 miles per hour, 1,191 kilometers per hour. At 1 atmosphere pressure when the temperature is 32 degrees Fahrenheit 0 degrees Celsius. Sound travels faster through water and many other media that are denser than air. In general, because the temperature of the air cools as altitude increases. Sound is refracted upwards and away from people on the ground. Thus, measurable sound decreases the farther away one is from the source. On the other hand, the stratospheric layer of the atmosphere increases in temperature as altitude increases, thus refracting sound downward.
How do I find financial aid to study meteorology?
other than contacting your university's meteorology department and its financial aid office. A good place to look for scholarships, fellowships, and internships is the American Meteorological Society. The National Council of Industrial Meteorologists also provides stipends to undergraduates. Finally, the U.S. Navy and Air Force both offer programs in meteorology for those who attend. The Reserve Officers Training Corps, ROTC, in college, and then go to officer training school. Your education is then paid for by the military.
Are the gases in the atmosphere evenly distributed?
You are not likely to stroll down a street and encounter a suddenly high concentration of oxygen or a pocket of unmixed argon gas. The constant motion of the weather due to fronts, pressure changes, varying temperatures, storms, and so on, is like putting the atmosphere in a food processor and hitting the blend button, and never turning it off. The percentage of each gas, therefore, will be constant anywhere below an elevation of 50 or 60 miles, 80 to 95 kilometers.
What is a superior mirage?
A superior mirage, also called a superior image, refers to the illusion that occurs when light from objects is refracted in a way that makes them appear as if they are floating in air above the actual object. This can occur when warm air blows over cooler surfaces, the opposite of a common mirage.
Has an asteroid ever hit Earth?
Yes. In fact, the extinction of the dinosaurs is believed to have resulted from an asteroid striking the Earth near the shoreline of what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. There is also speculation that, 13,000 years ago, a comet or large asteroid smashed into the planet and wiped out the Native American Clovis civilization, as well as mastodons, mammoths, and other large animal species that once roamed North America. This sort of impact is, of course, extremely rare. Today, astronomers estimate that small asteroids approach Earth and burn up in the atmosphere at a rate of about 2 or 3 a year. In October 2008, scientists were excited to have accurately predicted that a small asteroid 2008 TC3, measuring about 15 feet, 4.5 meters, across, would enter the atmosphere. It was the first time that NASA's Near-Earth Object program had successfully anticipated such an event.
Does all precipitation reach the ground?
No. Rain and other precipitation can often evaporate before reaching the ground. especially when the air is dry, low humidity. In the American Southwest, dry storms can be quite common, creating lightning and thunder but little precipitation. The danger of evaporating rain is that it can create conditions conducive to downdrafts and microbursts by cooling the air and causing changes in air pressure. Dry storms thus signal a warning to aviators about potential flying hazards.
What is a digital barometer?
A digital barometer is an aneroid barometer that works by running an electrical current between two strips of metal. The current measures the distance between these strips, which are affected by air pressure, and translates these into an electronic display.
What ancient Chinese book first discussed the idea of solar winds?
Although the Chinese discussed the idea of energy from the sun in terms of the notion of qi energy, the Book of Jin observed back in 635 c. E that comet tails always pointed away from the sun. The unknown author understood that this was the result not of wind in our atmosphere, but rather from energy emitted by the sun itself.
Does lightning come from ice?
Well, in a sense it does. The electric charge that builds up to create lightning is the result of snow and supercooled water droplets rubbing and colliding against each other. This generates a static charge just like when you rub your fuzzy socks against shag carpeting.
Why is the sun essential for weather?
Our sun is the source of almost all of the energy that creates weather on the planet, plate tectonics. The heat within the earth, tidal effects, radioactive elements, and the effects of gravity from Jupiter and Saturn provides the rest. The majority of the energy, 99.98%, is from the sun, however. Although the amount of light, heat, and other energy from the sun that hits the earth is equal to only 5 × 10⁻¹⁰ of its total output. This is still the equivalent of burning 700 billion tons of coal every day. It has also been calculated that the energy reaching Earth's upper atmosphere is equal to 5 million horsepower per square mile. That's enough to rev up the engines of 7,400 Indianapolis 500 race cars. Planet-wide, that would be about 14.5 billion race cars being powered up daily by the sun. If the sun's energy on the planet's surface was constant, it would not affect weather. This is not the case. Because our planet spins, giving us day and night, and tilts, giving us the seasons, the energy is not distributed evenly. Also, clouds and variations in the upper atmosphere affect solar energy levels. The result is that Earth is covered with areas of colder and warmer air, causing air masses to move, which are, in turn, diverted this way and that by variations in geography and the Coriolis effect. This is what gives us the weather.
Why does my nose run when I'm cold?
When you inhale cold air, it causes the mucous membranes in your nose to constrict and then dilate. This reflexive action encourages the formation of mucus and a drizzly nose. After a while, however, the body adjusts to the colder temperatures and the sniffles should stop.
How high would the oceans rise if all the ice sheets melted?
It is estimated that if all the ice sheets melted, including the polar ice caps, ice on Greenland and Iceland, and all the glaciers on the planet, the average worldwide sea level would rise by about 250 feet, 76 meters. Such a rise would decimate almost all coastal cities, shrink the living space on all the continents, cause massive climate fluctuations, and change our lives forever.
What is Doppler radar?
Doppler radar measures frequency differences between signals bouncing off objects moving away from or toward it. By measuring the difference between the transmitted and received frequencies, Doppler radar calculates the speed of the air in which the rain, snow, ice crystals, and even insects are moving. It can then be used to predict speed and direction of wind and amount of precipitation associated with a storm.
What was the solar neutrino problem?
From the very beginning of neutrino astronomy research, there was a discrepancy between the theory of nuclear fusion and the number of neutrinos detected from the Sun. Neutrino telescopes on Earth detected only about half as many neutrinos as they should have. This strange result was checked again and repeatedly confirmed. This became known as the solar neutrino problem.
What are tides?
Tides are the consequence of any two objects that exert gravitational pull on one another over a long period of time. Basically, each object gently pulls the other object into an egg-like shape. Because the gravitational acceleration on one side of the object is larger than on the other side. On Earth, the most observable evidence of this gravitational effect is the changing tides we witness.
Does the North Pole have the same average temperatures as the South Pole?
One might think that the northern and southern extremes of the planet would have comparable annual temperatures. In actuality, the South Pole is much colder. This is because giant glaciers have built up on the continent of Antarctica, where the South Pole is located. The inland ice sheets of Antarctica are 8,036 feet, 2,450 meters, thick on average. And this thick layer of ice keeps the South Pole about 50 degrees Fahrenheit 23.6 degrees Celsius colder than in the north.
What is the largest known meteorite to strike Earth in the past 100,000 years?
About 50,000 years ago, a metallic meteorite about 100 feet, 30 meters, across crashed into the Mogollon Rim area in modern-day Arizona. It disintegrated on impact, creating a hole in the desert nearly a mile across and nearly 60 stories deep. Meteor crater, or the Barringer meteor crater, as it is more commonly known today, is a remarkable and lasting example of the amount of kinetic energy carried by celestial objects. Just the lip of the crater rises 15 stories up above the desert floor. For a long time, scientists puzzled over the origin of this crater. It might have been volcanic in origin, they thought. But geological evidence, such as shallow metallic remnants in a huge radius miles around the crater, confirmed it was a meteorite strike.
Do people frequently die from lightning strokes?
Depending on sources, anywhere from 5 to 30% of people who are hit by lightning die from their injuries. The danger is not so much from burns but rather from the electrical energy stopping a person's heart. This is why CPR usually is necessary when someone is struck unconscious by lightning. More often, people who have been thus injured will be in severe pain and will be screaming as a result, while they of course will need medical attention. Their prognosis for survival is much better than that of the unconscious person.
How do tides work?
Two cycles of high and low tides occur each day, roughly 13 hours apart. High tides occur both where the water is closest to the moon, and where it is farthest away. At the points in between, there are low tides.
How did the last ice age begin and end?
Approximately 1.7 million years ago, the beginning of the Quaternary period. Pleistocene epoch, geologists believe the plains of North America cooled. As a result, large ice sheets began to advance south from the Hudson Bay area of Canada and eastward from the Rocky Mountains. These ice sheets advanced and retreated many times toward the end of the Pleistocene epoch in intervals lasting from 10,000 to 100,000 years. This most recent ice age ended about 10,000 years ago, when the ice retreated to its present polar positions. Currently, the Earth is nearing the end of an interglacial, warmer period, meaning that another ice age might be due in a few thousand years.
Can weather actually make pollution worse?
Yes, and it can alleviate it, as well. Rain, for instance, can wash away haze over cities, and wind can blow it away. Stagnant air masses, humid air, or temperature inversions, on the other hand, will allow pollution to build up. During the night, nocturnal inversions cause carbon monoxide to build up around freeways and other high-traffic areas. On the other hand, mixed layer conditions help to disperse pollutants when temperatures decrease over several thousand feet at a rate of about 4.5 degrees Fahrenheit 2.5 degrees Celsius for every 1,000 feet, about 300 meters, or so.
What types of psychrometers are there?
Old-style sling psychrometers are made from two thermometers secured to metal that is allowed to hang for a number of minutes until the wet bulb begins to cool. More modern psychrometers use a variety of sensors, including the use of chemicals that change their electrical conductivity due to humidity levels.
What is the Clean Air Act?
In New York City in 1966, air pollution became so awful that hundreds of deaths were attributed to it that year. This and other serious pollution problems in America led to the 1970 Clean Air Act, which was later amended in 1977 and again in 1990. The Clean Air Act was designed to improve the air quality for all Americans. It was preceded by the Air Quality Act of 1967, which failed to do the job because it did not require environmental standards to be set. The Clean Air Act, however, charges the Environmental Protection Agency with setting standards regarding emissions of air pollutants, ranging from ozone and benzene to carbon monoxide and particulate matter, from factories, power plants, and all modes of transportation.
Who were the first people to successfully forecast a tornado?
U. Army officers Ernest Fabush and Robert Miller were the first to correctly predict a tornado would form on March 25, 1948. Recognizing that weather patterns in central Oklahoma were very similar to those that had occurred a few days earlier when a tornado hit Tinker Air Force Base. Fabush and Miller told their superiors, and a decision was made to warn residents about the possible threat. A tornado again hit the Tinker base a few hours later.
What are the different types of satellites used today?
The two types of satellites used for weather observations are geostationary and polar orbiting. Geostationary satellites remain above a fixed point on the Earth's equator by traveling at a speed that matches that of the planet's spin. Polar orbiting satellites circle the Earth from pole to pole. These satellites orbit at a speed so that, 2 times a day, they are over the exact same spot on the planet in what is called a sun-synchronous orbit.
What is a low-high temperature and a high-low temperature?
When meteorologists look at daily temperature, there is always a low and a high temperature for each day. If the high temperature is the coldest high temperature for that day or for the month on record, you have a new record, a new low high. Conversely, if the low temperature for a day is quite warm and breaks records, that's a new high low.
Where does the word tornado come from?
The word comes from the Latin root tornare, which means to turn. Tronada, in Spanish, means thunderstorm and is also considered a source of the word tornado.
What is a contrail?
The word contrail is short for condensation trail, and it refers to the water vapor that condenses around the exhaust of a jet aircraft flying at a high altitude. First studied during World War II, when there was a concern that contrails would give away the positions of B-29 aircraft. Contrails are now of interest to climatologists who worry about their effects on global warming. For instance, studies have shown that where contrails are present, there is an increase in the formation of more cirrus clouds. Scientists are also concerned about the other chemicals in jet exhaust that could adversely affect chemical processes within the troposphere and lower atmosphere.
What are some other types of anemometers?
Besides the rotating cup anemometer, there is the sonic anemometer, swinging plate, or pressure plate. Anemometer, pressure tube anemometer, bridled, or windmill, anemometer, and the aerovane. Weather stations often use sonic anemometers, which calculate both wind speed and direction. 4 ultrasound transducers are set up in a circle, evenly spaced apart, in 2 pairs placed across from each other. A transducer will send out an ultrasonic signal to the one directly across from it. Winds blowing across this path will cause the signal to travel faster, slower, or change direction, thus indicating wind conditions. Pressure plate and pressure tube anemometers work by the fact that wind blowing against a plate or through a tube will exert a measurable pressure. Aerovanes and windmill anemometers can measure both speed and direction. As the blades on these devices spin, it is possible to calculate wind speed, and both will turn into the oncoming wind, which indicates direction.
Why have cyclones striking out of the Indian Ocean proven to be so deadly?
Cyclones that have struck India, Bangladesh, Myanmar, and other areas in Southeast Asia are no stronger than the powerful hurricanes that have caused so much death and damage in the Gulf Coast. Many more people have died as a result of these cyclones. However, because of high population densities near the coasts and because so many of these people live in poverty and survive in rickety shacks and other substandard shelters. The 2008 cyclone that hit Myanmar was particularly brutal in the area of the Irrawaddy Delta, a low-lying peninsula that had been converted to rice and shrimp farms. These farms replaced mangrove forests that would have served as natural buffers between the land and the oncoming cyclone.
What is the Space Weather Prediction Center, SWPC?
Part of the National Weather Service, the SWPC monitors solar and geophysical events that can affect communications, power grids, artificial satellites, and navigational systems.
What is the shape of a raindrop?
Although a raindrop has been illustrated as being pear-shaped or tear-shaped, high-speed photographs reveal that a large raindrop has a spherical shape with a hole not quite through it, giving it a donut-like appearance. Water surface tension pulls the drop into this shape. As a drop larger than 0.08 inch, 2 mm, in diameter falls, it will become distorted. Air pressure flattens its bottom and its sides bulge. If it becomes larger than 1/4 inch, 6.4 mm, across, it will keep spreading crosswise as it falls and will bulge more at its sides, while at the same time, its middle will thin into a bow tie shape. Eventually, in its path downward, it will divide into 2 smaller spherical drops.
What are VOCs?
VOC stands for volatile organic compound. They are organic chemicals that easily vaporize in the atmosphere.
Besides the 1974 tornado outbreak, what are some other serious outbreaks that have hit the United States?
On April 11, 1965, Palm Sunday, the American Midwest was struck by 37 tornadoes that killed 256 people and injured more than 5,000. An outbreak of 22 tornadoes on May 28, 1984, killed 57 in the Carolinas. Left 1,248 injured, and caused about $200 million in damages. The next year, on May 31, 75 people died after 41 tornadoes raged across Ontario, Canada, causing $450 million in damages. There were two terrible outbreaks in the early 1990s. From April 26 to 27, 1991, 54 tornadoes made landing in Texas and Iowa. 21 people were killed and 208 injured. The next year, on November 21, 94 tornadoes destroyed lives and property through 13 states, stretching from the Midwest to the East Coast. This outbreak left 26 people dead and 641 injured.
If a parhelion is a sundog, what is an anthelion?
Also caused by hexagonal ice crystals in the air, an anthelion is like a parhelion, except that it is seen at the azimuth opposite the Sun.
What is a hurricane?
A hurricane is a tropical storm that has winds of 74 miles per hour or more that forms in the Atlantic Basin. Hurricanes typically occur in the North Atlantic and Caribbean Sea during the months of July, August, and September. When warm surface ocean temperatures exceed 80 degrees Fahrenheit 26.5 degrees Celsius, providing energy that feeds into the storm. Seawater evaporates into the air, creating clouds, while the Coriolis effect causes the clouds to rotate. For a hurricane to develop, there must not be a lot of difference in wind speeds in the upper and lower elevations of the storm. If there is a big difference in these speeds, the resulting wind shear will cause the hurricane to become unstable, with clouds and winds opposing each other rather than working together in a gigantic swirl that increases in speed. Hurricanes do not tend to generate close to the equator, within 5 degrees latitude, because the Coriolis effect is stronger farther away from the equator, and also because they need a low pressure area that is not close to the equator.
How much does the entire atmosphere weigh?
if you were able to take all the gases in the air and place them on a scale. The total weight would be 5.1 quadrillion tons, 5.1 x 1015 tons, or 4.63 quadrillion metric tons.
How does weather affect Earth's rotation?
Imagine the water, clouds, and other gases lying on top of the Earth's crust as a big soupy mass that can shift around as the planet rotates on its axis and is tugged on by the Moon, Sun, and other planets. The oceans and atmosphere slosh around due to tidal action, bulging a bit on one side or the other, and this can hamper or speed up the planet's motion. In comparison to the total weight of our planet, the liquids and gases are fairly light. But the inertia they experience does, in fact, change Earth's speed. The amount of change is not noticeable to us, a few thousandths of a second each year. Over millions of years, however, this has a cumulative effect.
Does irrigation of farmland affect the climate?
Extensive land irrigation can, indeed, affect the weather. As of 2000, the total amount of land on Earth that has been irrigated is about 689 million acres. About 60% of the world's fresh water supplies are used toward this purpose, representing 137 billion gallons, 518.5 billion liters, of water daily. As one might imagine, when all of this water is spread over cropland, a certain amount of it will evaporate into the atmosphere. Hydrologists believe that this amount of evaporation is enough to increase the number of rainstorms that would otherwise occur.
How is seawater salinity measured?
The amount of salts in seawater is important because it affects ocean currents, which, in turn, affect the world's climate. Seawater contains a variety of dissolved elements, including chlorine, sodium, magnesium, calcium, sulfur, and potassium. In the past, measurements of salinity were taken simply by going out onto the ocean, filling a bucket with seawater, and testing the salt levels by measuring electrical conductivity. The more salts, the quicker electricity flows through the water because there are more ions present. There are also techniques to measure chlorine or other dissolved elements. More recently, sophisticated equipment has become available for measuring ocean salts remotely. Low-frequency radiometers mounted on C-130 aircraft can scan the ocean during flights, covering over 38 square miles, 100 square kilometers, every hour. The European Space Agency plans to launch its Soil Moisture and Ocean Salinity (SMOS) satellite in 2009 to take readings from space using a two-dimensional interferometric radiometer. A new technology that captures images based on microwave radiation emitted at a frequency of 1.4 GHz, GHz.
Is the greenhouse effect a good thing for life on Earth, or bad for the environment?
Like so many things about life on Earth, moderation is the key. Some greenhouse effect is a very good thing for life on Earth. Without any such effect on Earth, the oceans would eventually freeze. If the greenhouse effect increases significantly, however, many living organisms and species, as well as environmental systems that have developed over a long time, including human civilization, will face substantial challenges, and possibly even extinction. In the most extreme case, a runaway greenhouse effect like that on the planet Venus would cause all life on Earth as we know it to cease to exist. On the other hand, many plants will benefit from increases in carbon dioxide levels, warmer temperatures, and longer growing seasons.
What are chilblains?
Chilblains refers to the burning, itching, redness, and chapping that can occur when skin suffers prolonged exposure to cold, damp weather conditions.
What is the difference between a lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse?
A solar eclipse occurs when the moon passes between the Earth and the Sun, while a lunar eclipse happens when the Earth is between the moon and the Sun. In a solar eclipse, the moon casts a shadow on the Earth's surface, while the opposite is true of a lunar eclipse.
Why don't lakes and ponds freeze solid in the winter?
When ice forms in lakes, ponds, and other bodies of water, it floats to the surface because liquid water is denser than solid ice. As water cools below 38 degrees Fahrenheit 3.3 degrees Celsius, it becomes less and less dense, and thus more buoyant. This is good news for fish and other plants and animals that live in small bodies of water, since they can live below the layer of ice that forms.